Our next panel is about officials containing nationalism. We'll start with Ágoston Berecz from the Imperial College in Jena. Ágoston will speak about the adversities of imperial mapmaking in nation-state Hungary. Ágoston, take it away.
Thank you. Okay. So, thank you, Alexander. And I'm all the more grateful to Dasha and Alexander for having me here. That basically I don't have civil servants in the proper sense. I have been dealing a lot with public administration lately, but not so much with public administrators, and also dealt with kindergarten teachers, but they would be even more out of place here. So what I can offer are bureaucrats on top of the Imperial Mapping Agency and surveyors. But these people operated within the military, the common army, and also hikers. So we are in dualist Hungary, and as most of you probably know, dualist Hungary, after the compromise, possessed most of the trappings that were needed to carry out independent nation-building policies, even though close to half of its citizenry did not fit into such an agenda. Not only it had its own legal system, but Austrian laws had no effect in Hungary. And Francis Joseph carefully avoided even to comment on the repression of non-Magyar national movements. The only relevant state instrument of power beyond the control of Budapest government was the military, although a small separate Hungarian army did exist. This dent on their sovereignty was a major thorn in the side of Magyar elites, and it has become the political demand most likely to spark enthusiasm to impose Hungarian language and Hungarian symbols on the common army units that were recruited from or stationed in Hungary. In my talk, I will try to throw into relief what the somewhat fuzzy constitutional arrangement of dualism meant for the ways the limits of Hungarian nation-state sovereignty were negotiated and perceived. My example is arguably very specific, but it has the advantage of being inherently visual. Names on maps. In Hungary, hiking was picked up by the elites of bigger cities and the summer clientele of high-altitude resorts, exactly in the dualist period, following German models. Also, upon German models, day trippers cast the landscape into national frames and projected national meanings onto it. This was particularly significant in the non-Hungarian speaking peripheries, where comfortable hill walkers might also think to conquer the space for the Hungarian nation. Fixing place names was part and parcel of this symbolic appropriation. And since contemporaries were keen to organize all their social activities into associations, mountaineering clubs also started to mushroom, with the most important early ones shown on the slide. And for the rest of our story, what will be important is the last one, EKE, Erdélyi Kárpát Egyesület, Carpathian Society of Transylvania. It was founded in 1891 as an offshoot of the nationalist association MK. While it fully embraced the ethnically tinged Magyar/Hungarian state nationalism of the era, most of its destinations of choice lay in the Romanian-speaking highlands, and as such, they featured a chiefly Romanian place name cover, which foreshadowed tension and trouble. By the time the EKE came to life, a Budapest-based cartographic enterprise had already carved out a dominant position in the Hungarian market, with its school and wall maps displaying the Hungarian variants of names, or at least captioned in a Hungarian spelling. But for the purposes of hill walkers, only the 1 to 75,000 scale, so-called Specialkarten, of the empire's third military survey had a large enough resolution to be used. And once they came out, they were also out there for sale in bookshops and stationery shops. The military survey was carried out, and the resulting series of maps was published by the Vienna Institute of Military Geography. You can see on the map how the surveying of Transylvania went, sheet by sheet from 1869 to 1874. But these sheets were published together with the rest of Hungarian sheets only in 1889. On the military survey, the choice of place names was dictated entirely by practical necessities during military exercises or in the event of war, which is to say that military officers should be able to match the directions they received from the locals to the map. The guidelines stated that maps should primarily display the locally known names, and in linguistically mixed zones, the names used by the local majority first, with the minority names in parentheses and in half-size letters. Each place name was written in the spelling of the respective language. Predictably, both these principles and their implementation enraged EKE activists and members. In the year of its founding, and most of the story, actually, the timeline is quite dense here. So most of the story unfolded in the year 1891. So the association started out by publishing a hiking guide for Transylvania and annexed the map sheets of the then recent military survey. Disgruntled tourists launched attacks on the nomenclature employed on the maps. Consider Lajos Szádecki, professor of history at Kolozsvár University and the chairman of the club's Kolos County branch. Quote, above Árpás, Ucsa, and Vist, the valleys by the same names are bordered by peaks with the epithet Grand. On the military map, of course, written in Wallachian, Ucsa Mare, Vistea Mare. Although a Wallachian name has some practical justification here, the same Wallachianization is also widespread on the map, where we still have the old historical Hungarian names with a long past behind them. Our brave soldiers, for example, also display Sebesvár, Nagysebes, and Kissebes in the Kolozsvár area in Romanian first and in Hungarian only in small letters between parentheses, end quote. The words of another EKE board member is similarly from Hungary proper, Oktáv Hangai, professor at the Kolozsvár Academy of Commerce and the pioneer of skiing, as you see on the left. So his words may reflect a genuine bafflement that mountain topography in Transylvania, which he obviously saw as quintessentially Hungarian, was short of truly Hungarian names. Quote, why Valezsinului? In general, why is the Ünökö Ineu? Why Negoy? Why Surul? Why Henyul? Why do our entire Carpathians have Wallachian and Slovak nomenclature? We do have forestry directorates. Why do they not officially majorize the names of peaks, brooks, land divisions on the territory that they administer? On me, each Wallachian name makes the impression as if it marked the place for a hostile lever to topple our country by its four corners, end quote. Note that Negoy, Surul, and Henyul are names of peaks spelled in Hungarian, but the spelling did not make them Hungarian enough for Hungary. There were similarly thousands of village names of visibly non-Hungarian origins that Hungarian maps and directories simply displayed in Hungarian transcriptions, but which middle-class Magyars increasingly problematized. The same impulse to amend reality led the association to set up its toponymy committee right after its founding, in a bid to revive the names of medieval and early modern boundary perambulations, which they hoped would turn a more Hungarian face to members and the outside world. The EKE Toponymy Committee invited Transylvanian county leaderships to collect such data from their archives. For good measure, they also urged future writers of the club's anticipated county guides to invent new names for landmarks that were more easily memorizable for Hungarian speakers. The movement that the EKE engendered here then flowed directly into the government-sponsored quote-unquote regulation of Hungary's locality names, once the Transylvanian aristocrat Dezső Bánffy became premier. Hungarian hiking accounts and guides, including the EKE's own Transylvania guide, continued to make disparaging, sarcastic, or self-distancing comments on the military map in the following decades. These were often centered on a dichotomy between truth and falsehood, tacitly implying that a misty, imagined Hungarian place name cover from the past, rather than local usage, should serve as the measure of correctness. Viennese military cartographers came down to the charge of conspiring with dark, subversive forces against Hungarian political and cultural sovereignty. Some articles also tried to show that the maps were riddled with factual inaccuracies and did not even register Romanian names the way they were used by the people. Now, one thing that we can check today, surveyors had to proceed fast and probably often relied on just one informant per area. On the slide are the trilingual surroundings of Brașov, south of Brașov, where the mountain topography on the third military survey randomly appears in either German, Romanian, or Hungarian. So from west to east, we first see a large, not so large, middle-sized German patch, and then a big Romanian patch, and then a small in the east, a small Hungarian-only patch. West of Kolozsvár, we even find the hybrid form Vörfú-Részeg, which is a Hungarian main element, spelled in Hungarian, but coupled with the Romanian generic term Vörf, Romanian for peak. The ethnographer János Jankó, who had personally collected place names from the area, denounced this again as Valachianization, but what it shows is, if anything, is that the surveyors had approached the site not from the Hungarian-speaking villages to the west and south, but from the side of a Romanian-speaking village to the east, or else they got their data from a shepherd. Shepherds tended to speak Romanian. Well, as part of the routing process that required a periodic updating of the survey, southeastern Transylvania was reambulated in 1888-89, and the rest of the province was just awaiting reambulation in 1891. The MK, the Mother Association of EKE, petitioned two Hungarian ministries to make sure that the Vienna Institute of Military Geography would only adopt the settlement names contained in the latest official gazetteer of Hungary. They would pay heed to the EKE Toponymy Committee's advice and would appoint perambulating officers who knew Hungarian. A few months later, a meeting of the Hungarian Geographical Society also had non-Hungarian place names of Hungary placed on its agenda and came up with similar demands. Still in the same year, the Transylvanian MP Elek Topcsa transmitted this request to the Viennese Institute of Military Geography in the delegations. It soon became apparent that the desires of EKE leaders were irreconcilable with the basic principles applied in Habsburg military cartography. The Common Army was under the monarch's personal command and emphatically placed above nationalist bickerings, including even Magyars here. I only have the response that Hungarian geographers and tourist activists got from the military mappers. And I hope for an eventual published version, I can round out this story with the help of Tamara Scher and locate relevant sources in the Viennese military archive. Well, in any case, military mappers consented to indicate the settlement names according to the official gazetteer, as long as these were locally known variants. They also agreed to pay more consideration to Hungarian minor place names, insofar as local people used them. What they couldn't accept were the obsolete variants advocated by the EKE, which had no independent existence outside of archival files, and the organization's plans to galvanize them back to life. The same János Jankó, who we saw bashing the military survey, now liaised between the EKE and the more conciliatory Hungarian Geographical Society and illustrated this conflict of principles with the following fictitious example, fully in line with the association's ideology. Quote, in a now purely Wallachian place, there is a field that during the Magyar period of the village in the 13th century used to be called Árpaszer, and that is now called Árpásului. You want to use Árpaszer, but this is at odds with the soldier's second principle, as the village is purely Wallachian, and there is nobody who could show where Árpaszer is, but they can very well show where Árpásului is. He concluded, I cannot imagine joint action to such a degree does Magyarization clash with correction. After the Hungarian Geographical Society resigned to the Military Institute's principles, the EKE gradually also backtracked from its position, as the northern parts of Transylvania were reambulated in 93-95. The proofs were sent for correction to the Budapest Society, and the cartographers then followed by doing the rounds of the lands that more to the south that had been already reambulated earlier. The resulting changes were numerous enough to warrant a redrawing of the map sheets. So we have two sets at least that we can compare, but they didn't upset the mostly Romanian character of the Highland nomenclature. In fact, actually, like the majority of changes didn't have anything to do with the politics of names. So here, even between these two, we can find such changes as Csipkés tető into Csipkés hegy, which both are in Hungarian. One name is dropped probably for accuracy. So even after the revised map sheets came out, criticisms did not disappear. The new sheets are recognizable by the captions Nachträge and teilweise berichtigt. They continue to display the names of landforms in one version only, which was now more often a Hungarian one in mixed areas and in Magyar ethnic enclaves. Vérfőriszeg, as you see, became simply Riszeg, and several places with disputable names were diplomatically left unmarked. At least in the Romanian-speaking East, the revised sheets featured the Hungarian names first, as per the Central Gazetteer. Well, this sheet, from the second one from 1909, also features the Romanian ones in parentheses. What is interesting is that sometimes, like in the southwestern corner, there is Unciucu. Sometimes the Romanian name is spelled in Hungarian. Sometimes right next to it there is Piclișa in Romanian. So sometimes in Hungarian, sometimes in Romanian. What is even more notable, and here I wrap up, that such regard for Hungarian sovereignty did not necessarily expand to Slovak-speaking Upper Hungary. This map sheet from as late as 1915 depicts Zólyom County in the north, whose leadership had already Magyarized the names of the villages in the 1880s. Still, it features Slovak names as the main variants, including one Kovačova with a Haček, which was sure to outrage contemporary Magyar elites. This is also highly significant because it shows that the military mapping agency was willing to ignore the 1898 Hungarian law on locality names to carry on with their principles. The law on this law ordered that all state documents and publications and a host of other publications should feature the Hungarian name in the first place and feature it in the standardized form, which is to say that sometimes an altogether new Hungarian name. On the other hand, although as we have seen, the military maps also served other civil purposes and were distributed in the Hungarian half of the empire, it only made sense that they should contain the names that locals were the most likely to make sense of. And besides, the common army generals and officials who would have commanded military units in Hungary in the event of a war were as likely or more likely to be familiar with Slavic spelling systems than the Hungarian one. But here, for lack of evidence, I have to leave the story in suspense and hope that Viennese military archives will also shed light on how deliberate this defiance of Hungarian laws and the political consensus around them was on the part of Viennese military mappers. And I'm looking forward to your questions.